Hi, I'm Carolee here at the ADORNit Studio, and I'm here to teach you some tips and tricks of how we are using our ArtPlay paintables here at the studio. And we've been out on the road teaching at some of the stores, and we can't quite reach everybody who's interested. So we thought if we did a video, it would really help answer a lot of questions for you stay-at-home crafters who have access to the option of looking and watching our videos. And we appreciate you being here with us and subscribing to our videos. So we're going to talk about this coloring book called Folk Garden. And earlier I started a little picture that I had used with my coloring pencils. But the coloring pencils are unique because they are watercolor pencils. And I'm going to set this down so it's facing me so I can work with it. And I'm going to talk to you about these watercolor pencils and why they're so fun. First off, they are paint in a stick. And so they're the easiest way for you to use your paints and have it controllable, and also that you're able to start at a beginner level. It's a lot easier to use this type of way to use and colorize your projects than any other format, I think, out there on the market. So we're going to take a yellow, and I'm going to start coloring in on my paper. And the paper is slightly dimpled, and we purposely have used a felt paper so that it has that little bit of a bite and tooth to it, so it will actually grab the paint. And also when you go to use the water, it will not bleed through, and it moves across the surface of the water very nicely. The water will across the paper. So I also then use a water brush. So by laying down the paint first out of the pencil, because I'm literally putting paint on the paper, I am then going to use a water brush. And I did not cover the entire surface, and I did that on purpose. That is because when I activate the paint with the water brush, it magically starts moving the paint. So we're going to move it around, and then as we go, we can take that paint and pull it to the ends as a highlight, and all of a sudden that becomes your shadow area and that becomes your highlight. So I'll do that again right here. I'll grab the paint, move it around, and bring it out to the edges, and it becomes a really soft pale yellow. And where I left it dark, where I first applied it, it becomes the shadow area. So when you apply your paint, it's the deepest area, and that would be your shadow, and your lightest area when you walk the color out will be your highlight. It's very easy. One of the tips is once you have colorized it with your water brush, you do not want to come back over it until it dries. If you take a different color or your pencil again and you say, I want to darken that, you're going to actually scrub the surface of the paper and have a problem. So be sure that it dries between each application. The other thing is say we just did this area here, we don't want to actually paint or colorize this until this area here, which I'm pointing, dries. That way, this area has a time to settle, takes time to go into the paper surface, dry, settle down, and then that way it won't bleed as quickly into the other surfaces if you were accidentally to pull some water over, and you wouldn't have as much bleeding. That way you can keep your surface of each section clean and the color where you want it to be. It's a little bit more of a control factor. Okay, then you can take a pencil and say you want to go back over an area that you had painted and you want to bring some depth or color. What's so fun is you can apply a little bit again. I already had my first color applied, activate the paint with a little bit of water, walk it out, and voila, you've got yourself another layer of color, which because it had dried previously, it didn't cause a mixing. It was able to let one color lay, and then you put another color. That after a while, if you scrubbed really hard, you could get a little of the paint previously to lift, but not enough to make a difference. So it allows you to add depth to your piece because you're adding another color. Okay, I'm going to do that very thing right here on the bird. So I'm going to pick a color that's a bit darker, so it's going to be my shadow area. And this has dried. I don't know, can you see that, Mr. Camera Guy? So that they can see what we're doing. And I'm going to apply this darker area. And that's going to be my shadow area. I'm going to take my color. I'm going to activate the paint, soften it out, And look how that added that depth right there to that corner. And it was another color. So my first color was a light, light yellow. The next time I come back with like a yellow ochre type color. Down here I can do the same thing. I can come back and I can apply a yellow ochre. Color it out. And I can go dark and I can go really light if I want to create a mid-tone. And then leave my highlight area where I don't apply any paint at all. So it's as simple as activating the paint with your water brush. These water brushes are like the coolest invention. When I was doing tool painting books, we had to buy specialty paintbrushes. And you would have to whisk into the water or a water tub, and you would have to keep coming back and forth. This just feeds water constantly to what you're doing, depending on how much you squeeze. So ladies, this is like the neatest, coolest new invention that is out on the market, is these water brushes. There is a difference on water brushes. Some of them have a finer tip, some of them have more bristles and are a little fatter, but they do still come to a nice tip. So the other thing I want to teach you is about the tips of the brushes. So we've talked about applying the color and getting your shadows, your midtones, and your highlights. And that you can apply one color on top of another color for an effect that's beautiful if you want to, as long as you let it dry between applications. The other thing we can do is we can utilize our brush as a tool. And because it does come to a very, very nice tip on the end, it allows us to get in the very small detail areas. So for instance, I can come over here on my cake paints, pick up a little bit of paint, and I can paint right onto it as long as I hold the brush straight up and down and use the very tip top of that brush bristle. And I can control the tiny detail areas. And if you notice, I'm holding it more up and down like a soldier. I'm using the bottom of my hand and my fingers here as a way to kind of hold and guide. And I'm able to come in and apply that in those delicate little areas and not have a problem and not miss and make it go out of the lines and go, oh no, that was just not what I wanted. So your brush becomes an important tool. I will show you on the back side of this piece why I say that. So let's say I want to do a fine line. I'm going to pick up my paint, and I always use a paper towel on the side because I can always squeeze and blot that out and clean between colors. So never worry about that. Also, you control how dark or light your piece is going to be when you're painting based on how much water you have in activating the paint. So these cake paints, I do the same thing as a watercolor brush, as I'm going to drop water on them and then activate the paint because they're dry, and then as soon as you add water, it activates. So again, I'm going to try and do this so you can see where if you start up high on your brush on the tip tops, the bristle, and then you lay pressure over, you get a fatter line, and you can pick up and go thin, and then you can put pressure and go fatter, pressure, thin. So we call this pressure lift, depending on what you want to do. And keep dancing around until you've got your nice little rose petal. So say you want to do leaves. The same technique applies where you can go pressure and then you lift, pressure, lift, and then you've got pretty leaves. Pressure, lift, pressure, lift. A lot of people, what you see on Instagram and people that are doing fun lettering, what they're doing is they're actually using that very same technique with a brush where they are going to the tip of their brush, they apply the pressure. Oh, I don't have enough color for you to see that. Let me get a little more pigment. So you're going to go tip of the brush, pressure, and then lift again. And then you have the letter C. Pressure, lift, come back down. There's my letter A. Lift, and then I bring my pressure. There's my letter R. And so on. So as you can see, the pressure lift all depends on how straight up and down you have your brush, how you're dancing the tip of that brush and when you lay the pressure over. So that way you can make one big long continuous, or you can come up to one long thin. So it all depends on how you use your tool. And learning that very, very simple tip technique, like I said, how to use your pressure lift, allows you then to control what you're doing with your brush and also how you're applying the paint. So again, the more water you use, the lighter the paint will be, and the more pigment you use, of course, the darker it will be when you apply and paint. So we've talked about a lot of really good basic tips on how to use a water brush, how to use your watercolor pencils, and we have another one we'll do about shading and highlighting a little bit deeper. So watch the next video if you're interested in learning a little more. Thanks.